Hello, friends, and welcome to week one of our study, our summer book study, using the recent book by Reverend Michael Curry, Love is the Way, Holding on to Hope in Troubling Times. As I shared with you last week in our short blurb, we're going to be sending out a weekly video on Tuesday in our Daily Bread, summarizing that particular chapter's contents. There's 12 chapters in this book, and we'll go 12 weeks in a row together. These videos will be about 5 minutes in length. I'll draw on a few highlights that were meaningful to me, inspiring to me, challenging to me from the chapters, and then I'll have a few questions to pose to you and to us together as we wrestle with these chapters over the course of the summer. It's a gift to be experimenting in this way with these short videos. We're not going to be gathering on Sunday mornings as we typically do for our summer book study, and so please do send us your feedback if you're finding these videos helpful, not helpful, what could be better, what's going well. We are all ears. So today we focus on the first chapter entitled, What is this thing called love? And Bishop Curry dives right in by sharing that love has come to him in many faces over the years. He reflects in particular on a woman named Josie Robbins, who was a stand-in, kind of a surrogate mother for his family when his mother died tragically when he was a young boy. And Josie just kind of came into their lives and functioned as a caregiver and a supporter in so many ways. And Michael Curry talks about how she was the face of love. You know, love is one thing in theory, but it's a much different and more powerful thing in practice. Made me think about all the wonderful faces of love I have and have had in my own life, from family to friends to church members over the years. Perhaps you can think of some too. He then delves into different definitions of love, in particular in the New Testament, where in the Koine Greek that the New Testament is written in, they have three different words for love. Eros, which is more romantic love, like Valentine's Day love, you might say. A second word, philia, which is more brotherly friendship love, which is why the city of Philadelphia is called the city of brotherly love. But then the third Greek word for love is agape. Agape, A-G-A-P-E is how we spell it in transliteration. But agape is love for the other-oriented love that we do for the sake of a neighbor, a friend, a spouse, a family member, a church member, for society, for God's creation. And so unfortunately in English we have this one word, love, that has many different layers of meaning. We can love our car, we can love a favorite restaurant, we can love our spouse, our child, all very different kinds of love. And Michael Curry assures us what he's focusing on here is agape love, that other-oriented love that God provides us in sending God's Son to the world to love everything that is and will be. He talks a bit about 1 Corinthians 13, this famous passage on love that you often hear at weddings, sometimes hear at funerals. But Paul's actually not counseling a couple about to get married when he writes this. He's writing to a community that's in fierce conflict and pretty chaotic conflict. People are sleeping with one another's spouses and they're suing each other, and the highfalutin rich folks in the congregation are taking communion first and getting drunk before the other folks arrive. And it's a big old mess. You can read about it in 1 Corinthians if you like. But in 1 Corinthians 13, Paul interjects with this beautiful meditation on agape love. Every time he talks about love in that chapter, the word is agape. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. And so on and so forth. So this is a love Paul's trying to insert into the life of the Corinthian community and, of course, into our own lives as well. It's a love that turns the world upside down, that turns heads, that never times out. A love that he has seen in so many different voices and faces over the years. He lifts up all sorts of examples in the chapter, from Malala Yousafzai to Fannie Lou Hamer to Frances Perkins. What are some of the other folks he lifts up? I can't find them in front of me now, but it's many different examples he gives, and we of course could add our own. But he talks about love as God's GPS for living, this sort of core way of being, that God's being itself is love with a capital L, and our being itself, as we get carried away into it, is also meant to be love. Oh, that's right. He lifts up Hans Kung and William Wilberforce, who was instrumental in undoing the slave trade, at least in the British context. Finally, as we wrap this up, a couple of questions that came to mind. He spends a few minutes talking about the opposite of love, not being hatred, but the opposite of love being selfishness. And I found that to be really striking. The opposite of love not being hatred, but the opposite of love being selfishness. And he had a question for us when we're making a decision and we're wrestling with all these layers of gray. There's not a lot of black and white decisions in our lives. It's the ones that involve so much gray that we wrestle with. He asked us to ask the question, is this about me or is this about we? Is this about me or is this about we? And he's suggesting to us that when we go in the direction of love, we often make it about we. We often make it about the community, about others. That doesn't mean sometimes we don't need to have boundaries for ourselves and make decisions that allow us to stay in the game, to keep at it, to keep on keeping on in the work of love. But I was really struck by that opposite of love being selfishness, not hatred. And so I guess my question for me and for you in this first chapter, what is this thing called love? It's agape. It's other-oriented love. So my question for you is, what do you notice as you're coming out of the pandemic in the way that you're receiving God's love and sharing God's love? And I'm talking about agape love in particular, this other-oriented love. What are you noticing? Are you noticing your reserves are very low? Are you noticing your reserves are picking back up for engaging in this kind of love? If you're like me, your reserves were low and have been low, and for me, they're starting to pick back up. But it's still very much a challenge and an opportunity in these summer months. I want to close our video just briefly by showing you one of my favorite pieces that I have in my office. It's a beautiful piece by Mary Southard, who's a Catholic artist, actually lives here in Chicagoland. But she's got a great quote by William Blake, the poet, at the bottom. I'm not sure if you can read it, but he writes, "And we are put on earth a little space, that we may learn to bear the beams of love." Isn't that just a lovely image of a community circled around God's love and bearing that love to one another and to all creation? So I thought that would be a helpful image as we think about what is this thing called love, and how can we both receive God's other-oriented love and participate in it and share it with our family, our friends, our neighbors, our church, all those we might encounter. See you next week, friends. That's chapter 1. Chapter 2 we'll be into next Tuesday. Grace and peace.